Today we're talking about the Arri 535. In the late 80s, there was a desire to build a new, smaller sync sound camera. And Arri wanted to compete directly against MovieCam in a way they hadn't done before, as a lot of the sales were being taken away from Arri by MovieCam at this point in time. So they basically came out with a new movement that they stuck in their BL4, and it was a multi-link pull-down movement with 2 pull-down claws and 2 registration pins on a multi-link format. And it was very, very nice because it was a little bit quieter and the registration was a little bit better than the other movements that were on the market at the time. Meanwhile, Arri was dealing with pressure from MovieCam, and they saw their market in a little bit of trouble. So they wanted to rush to market with a new camera. So in 1990, they came out with what we know today as the 535. Denny Claremont had a great discussion with me about the development of this camera, and Arri brought him a black box, basically, that didn't even look like this at all, and they wanted to sell it. And they said, this is what we kind of want to do. And Denny was not impressed. It's that simple. And Denny decided to go with MovieCam, and a lot of other companies waited for whatever this camera was going to be from Arri. And it took a little bit of time for it to come out, but in 1990 it did. The first generation of this camera, the 535A, went to 50 frames a second, and the second generation, this one, the 535B, went to 60 frames a second. That's one of the major differences outside of some physical changes with the way that the cabling works. The camera is a slightly bit smaller on the B, so it's a little bit lighter, but it really isn't that much lighter. These cameras were met with some immediate concern because they were heavier than their predecessors, which is always interesting when a company builds something that's actually heavier than the camera that came before it at a time when weight actually meant a lot. And that's the funny thing about this camera, is that in all ways it really is a cousin of the BL4S. You know, it has a very similar style coaxial magazine. It has the multi-link movement. It makes the same amount of noise. The biggest difference, of course, is that this camera has a much better viewfinder system. It's just fantastic. And a much better tap, integrated video tap and stuff like that. So it is a better camera, as in like the physical body is better, but a lot of people still preferred to use the BLs because of their lighter weight for quite a long time. Getting this camera pushed into the market was a little bit tricky at first, but then when the 535B came out, it was easy for them to do that. And movie cams at the time weren't any real lighter, so it wasn't like you were going to gain a lot by going with movie cams. Arri's design philosophy at the time was to try to keep the camera as compact as humanly possible. And that's why they developed this coaxial magazine system, similar to the E20 16 cameras and Arri 16 cameras, where one side of the magazine has the supply reel and one side of the magazine is a take-up reel. And you just make the magazine wider, but makes the magazine not so deep. As you can see by the Arri cam up here, how big the 1,000-foot magazine is sticking off the camera, because it is not a coaxial magazine. If it was a coaxial magazine, it would be wider, but it would be much smaller as well, less profile sticking out of the camera. So this is the 535B, and on it is a 400-foot magazine loaded with film. And as you can see, this is the 1,000-foot magazine. And this magazine weighs about as much as my E20 35-3 does with no film in it, so it's relatively heavy, and that's with no film in it. When you add film in it, it's extremely heavy. It's really amazing that people in the past would shoot with these because they had no choice. There was nothing else in the market. Nowadays, we're so spoiled by lightweight small cameras, and it's really not a big deal. But to think about the past and how people had to manhandle these magazines around is quite amazing to me. The magazine slides onto the camera, and the way it works is that this is a cover. The film goes in this slot right here when it's sitting around, and then what you do is basically pop this cover off by pulling a pin, and then your film would be exposed right here. And on the supply side, the way you open up the magazine, you push the button in the middle, and then you open this. And then what we have in here is the supply side, all right? And there's a core in here because it was filming here before. There's a center little latch, and you undo that latch, and that would take out the core. If I can get it out. There we go. And then your roll of film is going to go on here. And we're going to go ahead and look at the other side really quickly. On the other side, which is the take-up side, it has what's called a collapsible core. And this is a core that stays on the magazine. It doesn't ever come off. And what you're going to do is you're going to open this up, slide the film in, lock it, and then roll it into place. Very, very, very simple design. It's actually a really, really nice design, actually. The only problem and the only thing you have to really worry about is with the collapsible cores, sometimes the film in the center might come a little loose, and so it's good to keep your finger on there when you're unloading the magazine. Let's take a look at loading this magazine in better detail. The 535 magazine is very similar to the BL magazine, and how it loads is coaxial based. And so what we have to do is we have to push the film onto this core, like so, and lock it into place. And then we're going to slide it into the trap at the top here of the magazine with our finger, and we're going to turn this knob the direction of the arrow. So we're going to feed it, and we're going to turn this knob. And eventually, in doing that, there it goes. We'll get enough film in there where it'll actually engage and start pulling the film through, though there's something wrong with this. So if there's something wrong and it doesn't pull through right away, take the roll of film out, put it back in your can, and then what you're going to do is you're going to have to clean it. So we're going to open up the other side, and we're going to pull out this chute assembly here. And in the bottom of this is probably a piece of film, and there it is right there. And so I'm going to take my finger and see if I can get that piece of film out of there. There it goes. Yep, once that's clean, then you're going to throw this back in again. Make sure there's no debris on this at all. You're going to throw this back in again, push the button. Whoops. Push the button, lock it in place, flip it over. Make sure that it has a flat, perfectly trimmed end to it. And then try it again. And you're just going to feed it into the little crack. A lot of guys, what they do is they'll put the film onto the side and then feed it through the crack first until it picks up, and there it goes, and then push it on. And then eventually, when twisting this, the film will come out the front of the magazine. And you can put the side of the magazine that is the new film side that needs to be done in the darkroom is now done. And you can flip it over the other side, and all you're basically doing on the other side is thread it through the hole right here at the top, or I should say at the bottom. And you're going to put directly on the collapsible core, lock it in place, make sure it spins the right direction, give it a couple of turns, and you are pretty much good to go. Put the top on, like so, and that's it. The counter works the same way as it does on the Arri cam. So you're basically going to use these buttons when the camera's on, and you're going to set how much film is in here, and then that is how you set it. But it's got to be plugged into the camera to set it. Different than the Arri cam, which could be done outside of the camera. So to load a magazine, you go ahead and you make sure that everything's open here. And then you go ahead and you slide the magazine on just like so. And you kind of feed the film in before you push the magazine all the way on. And you slide it all the way into place, and it snaps into place. And if the camera's powered on, you should make sure that the lights come on, which it hasn't yet, but it will in a minute. Make sure the film is looped all the way through, and then go ahead and close that, which brings that light on. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move the movement down. It has to be lined up with this to move it down. You're going to move it down in place. Now you notice the loop size is too small at the top. We're going to push this button in, and then we're going to turn so we can get our loop big. And the loop is too big down here, and we're going to turn that one to get that loop smaller. And then we're going to make sure that the film's engaged by turning this. And as you can see, it's pretty good. Now we can hit the phase button on the front of the camera. Is a phase button right here. So we can hit that phase button and make sure that it runs the film through really nice and smooth. So after we've gotten that process down, we're going to go hit start and make sure that our pitch is set for the quietest spot, and that's the quietest spot. Now that should stay the same for the entire production. You won't have to worry about that. This camera has two sensors, one at the bottom right here, and one at the top right here, that the film will hit, and it'll when the loop gets too big, it'll hit those two sensors. And then it also has a sensor back here to tell it when it runs out of film, when the film runs through here. The 535 is a very primitive and basic display on the side that allows you to change the speed of the film and also a couple other very basic functions. The camera also has a relatively very nice and bright viewfinder system that's orientable, which is really sweet. Some of the viewfinders have a built-in anamorphic knob as well that allows you to change the lens so that you can look at anamorphic lenses without having to add any piece to the viewfinder, which is really sweet. The viewfinder assemblies are gorgeous on these cameras. They're just so pretty. So this is the eyepiece section of it, and it has a beautiful bayonet mount that goes right on, and it's a solid positive lock, and it's locked on. That's how you get the extension viewfinders to go on. They stick onto that. That's how they don't have one, so it's hard for me to show that, but yeah, you kind of get the point. This camera does have a built-in video tap. It's an aftermarket one. It is I think it is a CEI. Yeah, it's a CEI tap. It goes right here. The neat thing is that because it uses kind of a standard mount system, you could kind of stick whatever tap you wanted to on this camera. There's nothing really that prevents you from doing that, which is super cool. It's such a really simple design, you know. I really like it a lot. And just like the BLs, you know, the external video tap system is really bad. Like, it's garbage. So you definitely want to upgrade this to an HD tap or something a little better if you were to buy one of these cameras for sure. So this is the PS mode to turn it off for the high speed mode. This is your ports for individual accessories. And then this is your battery input, and then a power on off switch down here at the bottom. This is a gauge to tell you how much film is left in the magazine. You can raise and lower this. And then when you're threading the magazine, this is the tool you use to thread the magazine, which we talked about already. Our viewfinder comes off by going here to open. And this whole assembly comes off. And then this is the lock to make sure that this doesn't move around. And then you have a friction loosen here for the whole assembly as well. And then this is an orientation, so you can turn the orientation around. Some extension viewfinders require orientation to turn around. And if you want to release this, you push this button, this whole assembly pulls up. It can go to the other side so that you can use the camera from both sides. And then all you do is just change the orientation using orientation, and you're good to go. Frames per second footage counter. You can hit mode. And then you can adjust the frames per second with this mode by holding, I think it's... It'll do 60 frames a second. So after you set your speed, on the back side of the camera is the switch you click to go into high speed mode. And then you can go ahead and run high speed mode. Okay, so just to preface this magazine's got a little bit of a problem. I've tried the other magazine we have. It's a little bit loud too. You know, these cameras are old and they're a little worn, so the camera should be quieter than this normally. But I'm going to lift it off the table, and I'm going to hold it so the table doesn't vibrate it too much, and we're going to see how quiet this camera is. So this is with a 4.5-foot roll of film in it right now. So it's not horrible. You know? It's not horrible. Let's go ahead and open the door. And this is the magic of the 535. See, it is a movement mounted on rubber bushings so that the vibration from the movement doesn't go into the housing very much. And it's also this amazing door system which has some padding on the inside that helps prevent the sound from leaving. Because when we open this door, you're going to hear a whole different camera running. And yeah, it's not supposed to be that loud, all right? There we go. That's a lot better. Yeah, that's much better, isn't it? Pitch is a little bit off. The pitch control on here is really critical because it changes the gap between where the pull-down claw pulls the film down. So it changes, so the pull-down claw goes from here to here, and the pitch changes that gap a tiny bit to change for different types of film, because sometimes Fujifilm or Agfa at the time, you know, they would have a slightly different perforation pitch, and so you can adjust the pitch here. 16 cameras have pitch control as well, but because the perforation is pretty much all the same, it doesn't really make a difference. You adjust it, and once you get it right, you're good to go. But with 35 cameras, because of the different film stocks, you want to have a pitch adjustment. I always kind of figured out that with Kodak stock, the perfs are the same all the time. So you don't really have to worry about it with modern Kodak film stocks. You're never going to have an issue with pitch. It's a very simple camera, actually, in the long run, which is what I like about it. It's very simplistic. It's belt-driven. There's nothing kind of crazy about it. You know, you don't have to worry about getting a camera that has crazy electronics like the Arri cams do. Well, thanks for watching this little breakdown of the 535. We are going to be doing a video that's a little more in-depth about these cameras eventually, but for the time being, I wanted to just do something while I had this camera. And we're going to be doing a video about the Arri cam soon as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.